Hello, everybody, and welcome to our last, but certainly not least, Invent Global Esports and Academic Summit panel. My name is Nicholas D'Orazio. I'm the Director of Corporate Strategy at Invent Global and host of this event. I want to thank you guys all for being with us. The last panel is that we've had 2 days of absolute rock-solid advice, so much wisdom, so much advice about how to start your own collegiate programs. And now, this panel is the absolute core. If you have stuck with this for this whole time, then I bet you want to start something of your own. I bet you're interested in starting your own esports club or your own esports team at school, and we are going to give you the bare bones, brass tacks, some practical advice on how to do it. So I am joined by a fabulously experienced panel of collegiate experts. Some of them have been on our previous panel, so we thank them for their continued time and service to IGEAS. Why don't we get started and introduce our panelists? Greg, why don't you start, man? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. My name is Greg Adler. I'm the coach of esports at the University of Texas at Dallas. Someone who's been involved with scholastic esports for about 6 or 7 years now, and been heavily involved with collegiate for the last 4 years now.
Nice, nice. And Max, aka Pengu, please introduce yourself to our panel.
Hey, how's it going, guys? My name's Max, clearly. I go by, Pengus Spelt. A lot of people call me Pengus all the time. My webcam totally died, didn't it?
But don't worry, your voice is still perfect.
Brilliant. I'm glad to hear it. It'll be back in a second. But anyway, so that's totally throwing me off. In fact, 6 years now in collegiate. Basically, around 2014, I feel like is when everyone kind of started ramping up if they are remotely involved with League of Legends. Mm-hmm. Essentially, I just volunteered for a club activity, and, before you know it, I'm managing another team, and then I'm picking up another esport and, trying to compete myself. And here I am today, like, absolutely just snowballed out of control. What are you going to do, right? So,
Hey, man, you followed the first rule of getting involved in esports. Just show up. It's vitally important. Chad, why don't you introduce yourself to our panelists?
Hey, my name's Chad Smeltz. I'm the director of esports for Harrisburg University. I spent my first 3 years working in professional League of Legends as a head coach and general manager, and then I've spent the last 3 years in collegiate as a director.
Awesome. And AJ, bring us home, man.
How's it going? My name is AJ Dimmick. I'm the director of esports at the University of Utah. We are getting ready for season 4 of having a varsity institutional-driven program. Before that, I was the game industry relations person in the entertainment arts engineering program at University of Utah, and so games all day.
Games all day. So speaking about games all day, if you're listening to this panel, you've probably been hearing about games all day. So maybe you want to start your own. Mm-hmm. Maybe you want to start your own competitive esports team. This is what we're going to try to talk about. So first question, let's just the very, very basics. What type of advice would you give towards someone who is on the precipice? They're like, maybe want to do it. They just need that last little bit of convincing. What is the type of things that maybe they can expect? Or what is the type of hurdles you think that they have to get used to overcoming? AJ, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I think the first thing that you want to talk about with this is if you're on the student side and you're on the club leadership side is be careful what you wish for when you're getting involved with this, because with institutional support comes inviting a lot of cooks in the kitchen to have a voice in what you're doing, and agendas of the university involved with it, and all sorts of things. And so that's always a give and a take, and it is definitely complicating. And so I definitely think there are some student communities who that might not be what they're looking for, even though they think they are. Mm. And there are other ways and plenty of ways to get resources. On the institutional side, it's don't expect an overnight kind of return on that kind of investment, and there are lots of reasons to get involved with it. And so everybody just has to manage expectations and know what they're getting into when you talk about these things.
Yeah, and I've seen some nodding heads. That's pretty much a strong agreement. Max, I know that you kind of before the call were in strong agreement with the reality of getting a university involved. That is often a double-edged sword. You have to give up maybe some control. You have to be aware of the university's needs. What experience do you have with that?
I would say so. Basically, I've approached a lot of my positions as like a coach and head coach have been one from either I'm coming up with a roster or like a lineup or a group of players that are from like a very small grassroots sort of background, or then the other end of it is kind of being thrust into a program like ECIs where it's all very well established and you're slotting yourself in there. So having seen like both ends of that and that sort of transition, I feel like that I 100% agree with those sentiments, but like you really have to be careful about what exactly you are. What's the point? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Being recognized by the university is great because you get maybe you get a little bit of facilities and stuff, or you get some jerseys and equipment, and obviously those are all positives. But at the end of the day, the counterbalance to that is then you are also representing the university in your public spaces, and so you can no longer really go off on Twitter about something extremely controversial without getting into trouble over it if you've got university of whatever plastered in front of your name on there. And there's lots of things that come with that sort of those benefits,
Yeah.
So it's about a trade-off.
And speaking of representing massive esports events at their university, Chad has probably been hard at work all day preparing for the massive tournament happening tomorrow, right?
Yeah, we've been bouncing around for most of today. But yeah, we have the Hue Invitational Tournament in League and Overwatch that's going to be coming up this weekend. So hosting that is definitely a lot of work.
Yeah.
But from my point of view, another additional thought for this is that we've kind of talked about the institutional side or bringing in the institution into the competitive team, but also making your team competitive. I think people always say that they want to be competitive, but they also don't know how much work actually goes into that as a player or as a coach or as an analyst, or even what it takes to schedule all of these things and try and get everybody together to try and start competing together as a team, all of the communication skills that go into it. I think people that aren't, obviously if you play sports, if you've done other things, you're used to competition. And so that applies just as much to esports, if not more in a lot of ways. And so there are a lot of upfront challenges that you have to tackle in order to start being competitive.
Yeah. Greg, you're also nodding your head. What are some of the challenges that you may have encountered when trying to make that decision? Am I really going to try to push it to be the very best? How do you try to balance that within a university setting?
Well, I think the biggest thing is AJ kind of hinted at it a little bit, but I think setting clear goals and objectives that are unique to your program is the most important thing, right? So being competitive can vary at very different levels, right? You can be from competitive to being a nationwide competitive program all the way to within your state and locally. So I think being able to identify what you want to do with your program, what your university wants to do, and what would work best for the team that you have existing, and create goals that match those expectations. Okay, so our goal is to do this. How are we going to achieve that, and how are we going to get our community and our students on board with that goal?
Mm-hmm. So I'm take it back to the really nuts and bolts. I'm going to assume that if I was a very plucky and very ambitious student and I wanted to start my own esports team, probably the first thing I want to do is figure out, well, who at my school is any good? What game does my school have a community around that wants this, right? What type of steps do you think students can do to try to learn that stuff, right? Say you are new to a school, but you want to start the esports thing. How do you kind of do that, boots on the ground, reading the pulse? How do you get to know what your school would even want in terms of an esports team? AJ, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so at the University of Utah, every school that's been able to do this, it invariably, every single time, is the result of a grassroots student effort. And we were no different and had a huge gaming club in the Crimson Gaming Club. And that gaming club coalesced around a community called Crimson Gaming. And when they did events, they gave gamers of all different types a reason to come. And there was always a Smash thing and a Overwatch thing and a League thing and reasons for all of them to be there. And ultimately, no matter what you do with a varsity thing, if the things you don't invest into don't trickle down to what not only, because we talk about competitive esports too much a little bit, it has to trickle down to the enthusiasts and the gaming community, and your esports team has to continue to be that hub for that community. It's kind of the most important thing. And so kind of setting those things up where everyone has a reason to be invited and everyone of a like-minded who's interested in this space can kind of be there. You get to know your community really well. And it's absolutely true that certain titles and certain communities vary from school to school to school. And not only that, it evolves over time. 4 years ago, CSGO was huge at the U, and it's much less so now. Now, the Smash community is one of the most vibrant communities on the campus. And absolutely, and you have to keep in touch with that and kind of serve your audience what they kind of want to see, and it's definitely something you have to work at.
So would you say, and this is an open question to the rest of the panel now, would you say that it's a generally good idea to stick to the most popular games, or is it plausible to, like create an esports ecosystem around maybe some indie titles or maybe some smaller games, that aren't necessarily always front page on Twitch with 20,000 view championships? Like, where do you think the balance lies between trying to pick a game that's popular but also pick a game that you have sincere interest in? Greg, would you like to take that one?
Sure. So I think there's two different aspects to this. Number one, I think it depends on what your goal is, but if your goal is to start a team and to be the most successful in the team, I think that aspect is the way to do it. You find the game that's the most popular on your campus, that has the biggest esports scene, and you go from there. But I don't necessarily think that has to be the way, right? So if you're a student and you're looking to start a team on your campus, even if the game is not popular on your campus, if it's something you're passionate about, that's all that really matters, and you have to go from there. As an example, on our campus, like our varsity program, we have a really strong league team, we have a really strong Overwatch team, but our Smash Ultimate team is the best in the nation. And the reason for that is because our community is so strong. Like the DFW Smash scene is incredibly passionate about what they do. And so when I recognized that early on, I was like, okay, I this may not be a big scene in collegiate, right? It's hosted by CSL, but Nintendo doesn't necessarily host a league. But you talk to those students and they're as passionate as anybody else would be for any other major esport, right? They care the same, they work the same. So the big thing is if you're passionate about it and that's what you want to do, you don't have to go with what's mainstream. Just go with what you want to do, but you just have to make sure you're working that's as hard to match it. It's going to be a harder route to get there if your esport isn't as big, but that doesn't mean it's not justified. It just means you have to work just as hard to get to that point.
Yeah. And you know what? I kind of like what I'm envisioning now is like this iterative approach. So we've already talked about you have to stay authentic to yourself, right? We've already talked about you have to lurk more, right? You have to understand what your school actually wants, what's your unique advantage. You have to have a plan. What is our goal? It doesn't always have to be competitive. Now, let's answer a difficult question. Say that you have all that in spades. I've researched it, I know what game I want, but no one's paying attention. There's no passion, no one's signing up, no one's showing up to tournaments. I feel like I'm like the only one with the big picture goal, right? I've met many student leaders who can be discouraged at that. How would you say, what are some first steps? Like, how do you really go out there and get those first members, get that first community? How do you really build it from scratch? Max. Please chat.
Yeah. Max, do you want to go?
I was just going to make a comment that if you've done your research and you know that's the popular game, then I'm not sure why people aren't showing up due to interest. But
yeah.
No.
I can actually piggyback off of that a tiny bit, actually, because brute forcing things can be pretty tough.
Yeah.
There will definitely be universities and colleges where whatever the most popular, let's say 2 or 3 games are, one of them just might not be that big at that university, and that happens. And so, the joke that I use is that, like, if you don't have anybody to compete against, then, like, is it actually, like, are you actually competitive right now? And so you do have to kind of find other people, even not just at your university, but at other places that you can compete with and see if that's a start, and then go from there. And then that way you can build out and say, like, hey, maybe we have this neighboring university that's really close to us, and say they're interested in playing against us. Like, let's try and get something going and just see what it's like and try it out, and kind of maybe try and foster it through different ways like that. But you can't force people to want to play a game. You kind of have to try and see if there's at least a little bit of interest to start, and then you can grow that tiny bit.
Yeah.
But if there's literally nothing, then you can't brute force that, I think.
In my experience, in terms of colleges, taking advantage of pre-existing rivalries or pre-existing events is a very, very good way. Back when I was in college and I was trying to start our gaming league and esports things, it just wasn't a thing. Like, no one really cared about it. But we really started to get noticed when we just started to partner up with the other big student clubs, right? When we started to, maybe we can, we don't have to necessarily control everything. Maybe we can be a side event or a side booth of what was already the biggest glee club or something like that, right? That actually helped us get our members in an early way. So in terms of just getting an audience, I think that's some good advice. AJ, you I mentioned before, questioning whether or not you even have to be competitive, right? And I think that is a valuable mindset for the student leader who is facing that problem, right? Who is facing that problem of, I'm putting in the resources, but it's just, we're not there, we lose, there's no competition. Can you give us an idea, or maybe like an example of what an esports team or club or program could look like if it's not necessarily trying to be the very best? Maybe it has alternate goals. What are some of those alternate goals other than just competing at the highest level?
Well, my answer to this is kind of twofold, and it is absolutely true that on the publisher and the way we do content competition side, we do make esports top heavy and do constructs that kind of serve those enthusiast teams that aren't necessarily highly competitive too much, and we do have to fix that. And that's a big thing that we should take on and give them a bigger role in having a good time. But on the institutional side, there is so much to gain about getting together and representing your university and being vocal about wearing the colors and advancing the interests if you're passionate about esports in your campus and furthering it. And furthermore, there's a lot of pride in we have a lot of satisfaction of growing homegrown kind of kids that you know how much better they are on the last day of the season relative to where they were on the first day of the season. And we've grown a really competitive Overwatch team with all homegrown guys that are going to be engineers in a couple of years. So I think for those guys don't be dissuaded, but also it's about so much more than competing on those levels. And there are, like, a lot of games have, like, you set the bar for yourself of what's going to win, and a lot of those emergent goals. And so if you're a plat level league team, be a diamond level league team by the end of the season. And so there's a little steps in a long game.
Yeah. I like that idea of the long game. You know, sometimes we focus on the short term, especially when you're trying to start something from scratch, right? It doesn't feel good, for example, and I'm sure, you know, a lot of people can relate with this. You're trying to stream and you have one viewer, you have no viewers, right? Like, that can just like shut people down immediately. But that's literally where everyone started, right? You have to do those small iterative approaches. One of the things we talked about in previous panels was about, you need to have attainable goals. That was something that we heard over and over again when it comes to trying to start these esports things from scratch. So that's kind of my next question, right? What are some obtainable goals that can serve as maybe a roadmap or just some guiding stones that, if, all right, I have the idea, I want to do it, what should I be trying to hit, right? So, like, what's one of my first, first goalpost here?
Well, I mean, I think obviously the first thing is getting people in the door. I mean, as we spoke about, getting people there to show up in the first place. I think that's the first goal. But I mean, secondly, I think, it's hard to say overall goals because every program is so different, right? Yeah. A school with 60,000 students compared to a school with 1,000, depending on their infrastructure, could be really hard to compete with one another. So your goals are going to be very different from one another. So I think the first thing is to figure out what you want to do individually with your program. But second off of that, I mean, kind of a commonality between everything we've been mentioning is you have to be able to adapt, and you have to feel comfortable to adapting. So, like, you want to get people in the door, no one showed up, why? Did you choose a game that's not popular? Did you market it incorrectly? Is it something that, only, not many people are passionate about? So I think it's being able to adapt to what is happening with your appropriate goals. So if you set your goal of being like, okay, like AJ said, we're a platinum level team and we want to be a diamond level team at the end of the year, and you didn't get to diamond. Okay, why did we not get to diamond? Okay, what did we do incorrectly? How can we adapt and change our process accordingly? So next year when we come into it, right off the bat, we're like, okay, this year we did this badly. We're going to fix it this way, and this is how we're going to go into this year. So I think it's good to, like, consider overarching goals, but you really have to think individually about what your school and your program needs, and then kind of figure out your goals from there.
Chad, I've actually heard people in discussions mention a Harrisburg as one of, like the goalpost, right? Like, if you're trying to talk about successful esports programs that you want to admit, obviously Harrisburg's in that discussion. But I really like this point that Greg made, that sometimes you have to pivot. you have to change. You have to be flexible. So has Harrisburg gone through some of those pivots? Have you had times when, trying to really ramp this thing up? What are some of the pivots and changes that you may have seen in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, you absolutely have to pivot, and you're going to make mistakes no matter what. Like, no matter what level of competition or what level of club or anything, like you're going to make mistakes along the way. So as long as you're learning from them during that process, then that's fine. And so right off the bat, I mean, talking about what kind of pivots we've had to make, the Hugh Invitational is a great example. So the first year, it was a festival. It was a gaming music festival.
Yeah.
That didn't work out as well as we had wanted it to, so we said, okay, let's pivot and take it to being a gaming thing in full, and let's double the amount of teams. This is all in person, and so we had 64 teams last year in person, and that was a lot. And we decided, okay, like I decided I don't want to do any more than that, because that's pretty much the cap. And so,
and by the way, just a quick aside, I saw Chad at that event. If someone could be described as being on fire without there being any actual fire in the building, that's what Chad was. It was the busiest man I think I've ever seen in my life. Literally walking from floor to floor. Just it was crazy. There was a lot of teams there, man.
I think I gave people a kind of face where they didn't want to bother me because they saw me kind of with that kind of face on. But then this year we had to pivot into doing an online event instead of doing it in person because of COVID. And so like things are going to pop up, and you have to be able to adapt. And like, I mean, that's kind of esports in a nutshell. Like, it's going to apply to clubs, it's going to apply to varsity, it'll apply to any game. And so whether you're talking about competition and practice times and having to like deviate around people's schedules, because some people might be working, for example, because they need to make money on the side, and there's going to be so many other things and factors that go into it that you just have to adapt to what your students need, basically.
Max, this next question is for you, but let me explain the context a bit. I feel as if a lot of my time in the university space trying to create things, I take for granted that I generally know which type of academic administrators and professors or roles can help me out. Like I kind of know who I should be talking to, who doesn't have any authority here, or so and so. And it's really, really helpful, right? It's really helpful to just be able to get to the point and do something. But when I was first starting out, I didn't know that at all. And I think that's something that's a hurdle for a new, aspiring student leader or, esports producer. So let me ask you, what do you think are the types of academic resources that student leaders should be aware of first and foremost when trying to start their own collegiate presence at their school?
So, fantastic question, actually. Then basically, once again, not to sort of broken record on this, but it does tie back to, at the end of the day, what does your club or your team really, what's the goal? What's it going to accomplish? Yeah. And luckily in the university space, a lot of these things have been 100% roadmapped for you. It's fantastic. Like, if you are more on to getting sort of the team as a figurehead, sort of major institutional edifice, you are looking to get through mainly campus rec offices or any other types of competitive team. You're following the sports path in a sense.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were looking to make more of a, I guess the competitive team as a accessory or sort of showpiece for a gaming club on campus, which is a really, really common one for when you don't have a bunch of masters level players to be able to compete with, at the top level. Yeah. You are typically going through, whatever type of campus life or recreation, rather just sort of, the general clubs, offices, and
the
all
campus
that.
life type things, the resources that any student club would have, right?
Exactly. And that's more to getting I think that's a lot to do with getting money and stuff like that. Realistically speaking, if you need to say you're having a hard time securing a place for your club to meet or any of that kind of stuff, that's really about just getting out there, talking to a lot of people and seeing what's, the options are. And once again, it really is, so much of esports is about being adaptable, being able to do basically everything. I'm sure all four of you can agree that all of you have done an extraordinary number of jobs outside the purview of what would be, the normal umbrella of your, what was on your job posting or whatever. But, it's
nice.
Just talking to lots of people and figuring it out and being ready to go on anything. So.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, please, AJ.
I will say this, like, and it's just flat out true. Of we could have 5 LCS players on our team and not lose for 15 years and win every national championship there ever was, and do all the things and do a certain level of admin. And we could have double lift to carry and then go, whoever that is, cool. But it's just the way it is. But when your program starts showing up on academic papers for physiology, for sports psychology, for sports nutrition, and you're involved in those things, that gets the attention way more than those other things are. And so there are tertiary ROIs to a university, and it's too often talked about as a money thing. Oh, there's no money for this. It always has to answer the question as how does investing in this space, how does adding resources to this space, how does being here add to the academic mission of the university? And so you can't ignore that. You have to answer the question. Secondly, there's a ton of people on your campus. There's plenty of willing partners, I guarantee you, who will take your esports team and involve it with academic research of grad students and professors, all sorts of things where you can be involved with those things. It's not that hard. And so like you have to address that and try to find partners with those kind of errands and contribute to the university and colleges in that way.
It's a difficult skill to learn, but you 100% figuring out how to convey like esports topics and like the merits of why you would want to do this or why the university should care is such an important skill. It's crazy. Like, you know, typically, I mean, the easiest selling point is usually that like clubs like this are really important because gamers and sort of generally that sort of group are very disenfranchised, sort of not, you know, they have a lot of social associations with being very like sort of reclusive and stuff, to sort of very like estranged groups that don't actually know anything about how social like modern gaming is and stuff. And so like being able to sell it as that is huge for people. Like, you know,
there was a point that a panelist made earlier today about when they are talking about the health and wellness of their sport athletes, right? That, you know, they're like football players and things like that. It's about trying to get them to slow down a bit. Maybe don't go to so many parties, don't go to so many things. But when they're trying to think about the health and wellness of the esports and the gaming athletes, it's actually the opposite. It's like, hey, like maybe you should get out. Like maybe we can have this club. Maybe we can have this mixer. So yeah, I think that's a really, really important angle. If you can start solving problems your university has, or if you can even start to notice, because, you know, you're a student at your school, if you can start noticing problems that maybe the university isn't aware of, if you can, you know, like let them know, hey, there's a big group of gamers who just, they're not feeling inspired, they're not feeling the school spirit, there's nothing for them. Maybe we should create something for them. Oh, hello, here's my plan for like, you know, like an esports club, or here's my so-and-so. That's a really good angle to hit it. Greg, I noticed you were nodding your head a bit during that. You seem to be in agreement about this strategy of trying to gain value for the school. Do you have some examples within your own organization in which maybe you have demonstrated or convinced someone that, yeah, this is good for the school, good for academics, good for students?
Well, I mean, I think that's off of the aspect of creating a competitive program. Like, I think there's opportunities for it to compare. But I mean, I think especially in like a COVID time, there are so many different ways that you can get involved at your university through your esports program. I mean, as an example, on our campus alone, we don't have an orchestra, but we have an anime orchestra. To speak to the culture of our university. And amazing. As an example, last year we partnered and we had them play a bunch of video game music as part of an event we were hosting. Or as another example, our student affairs program, they were looking to host, essentially they have like a weeks of welcome event and they couldn't do it because we're not on campus. So we made it all digital. But knowing that like League and Overwatch kind of has a little bit of a curve to get into, we hosted an event where we did Scribble.io, which is essentially Pictionary, Crunker. We did all these free browser games that you can play from your phone, and we said anybody that wants to come, you just jump on Discord and you play with whoever you want. And we had like 300 students playing these games. And so I think the big thing is creating these opportunities, right? You don't know what's possible until you reach out to these potential partners on your campus and see what they want to have interest in. You know, there's nothing stopping you from sending an email and being like, hey, I have a passion for esports, I have a passion for gaming, I want to see how we can connect, let's just talk. they don't respond, then you follow up again. That's what it's all about. But there's so many potential partnerships and opportunities that aren't looked into simply because people don't take that chance to kind of broaden their horizons and go out and take a little bit of a risk.
Yeah, and a shout out in the chat. Anime Orchestra really is one of my favorite phrases of the event. I think there was a phrase in which someone said, "I love calendars." That was one of them. Anime Orchestra is probably number 2. I think I want to go through because there's such choice phrases. By the way, chat, if you guys have any questions for our panelists, please use the swap card functionality. I think the moment you add a question mark after it goes into our questions column, which we can see. So be sure to ask some questions in the chat. So let's just imagine all the things we talk about we've done right? We're good, we have it, and I have this esports team. So cool. Let's talk about branding. Let's talk about trying to get it into a thing that students can recognize as their own, right? How do you take this club that maybe you started and maybe your close circle, but how do you expand it to invite as many students as possible? I really love this point you said, Greg, about these fun flash games or these browser-based games that, have low barrier of entry. You can play it even if you're not competitive. Those are the type of things that really work well. So do you guys have any other examples of how to expand that invitation? Once you've created your team, how do you get support? How do you get fan love? How do you get students to be, oh, hey, look, that's my esports team. I love those, I love that team. I want to support them. Is there any maybe best practices or things you guys have seen throughout your careers?
I'll actually speak to this one really
please.
quickly. I think one big thing we haven't really talked about is how important it is from the word of mouth of students to talk about their program.
Yeah.
Because it's great for us to be like, yeah, esports is awesome, our program is awesome. It's great for us to say that. It's another thing for the students to openly talk about how awesome it is and how much they enjoy it. And I can't speak to say how much word of mouth goes a long way. I mean, even talking about with other teams, like our Overwatch team consistently plays against Mizzou. And we've had a really good relationship with them. Same with Utah. And I can't tell you how many times our players are frequently like, man, they're awesome. Like on Twitter, they're talking about how cool they are, how we get to play against them, the level that they're at. And you're creating those relationships. You're creating, those rivalries, those fun things. But it's the word of mouth that goes a long way. When you show pride for your program and you show pride for what you're taking in and you're vocal about that pride, it goes a really long way. So word of mouth directly from the students really helps you grow out in the long run.
Yeah.
There's a couple things that I would say on this is there's a distinction from campus admin from tolerating this on your campus and not getting in the way of it for existing and embracing it.
Yeah.
And so there's a difference between those two things. And so it goes a long way with players in the student community when it's embraced and people who are known commodities in the campus support it, tweet about it, or show up to a game and do those things, and seeking those people out so that it's not just something that happens on your campus, it's part of the campus experience of your school. But also,
that's such a nuanced point. Sorry, but it's just very important. It's something that is a part of your school. It doesn't just happen on your school. That's a very good phrase there. Yeah.
But also, it's from a director side to student leader side of having a varsity esports team and institutional support for this has to leak down to community enthusiasts and average students who aren't necessarily on the team. And if it doesn't, then they literally don't have a reason to care that you exist. Yeah. And so they have to have a stake in it and have to have things that they benefit from and things that they can do and things that they can see and things that they can participate in and play. And gamers like to play. And so if there's a varsity esports program that doesn't leak down and show benefit to those students, then that you shouldn't have their support. And so it's really important that those student enthusiasts and the club kids and those gamers on campus have a reason to care that you exist and the things that you do reach them.
Chad, this next one's for you, and then we have a question in chat I want to get to. Kind of piggybacking off what AJ was just talking about, this trickle-down effect, right? Your esports team or your competitive program has to somehow, make the kids and make the students feel like, yeah, this is something that's part of my campus. What are ways that Harrisburg has been doing that, right? What are some of the successful ways in which you have taken this, this core competitive community and you've expanded that invite? Can you maybe tell us about some of the ways in which you invite the other students in? Oh, you're muted. Don't worry.
I think the biggest way that we like to do it, because our university is very small population-wise in terms of undergrads. I believe we only have about 700 or 800 undergrads, and so one of the ways that we like to do it is we like to combine. We like to do events of all different sizes. It's cool to do Hue Invitational once a year and do something really big, but we actually do a lot of smaller events focused around trying to get people in the student community involved. But the other really cool part that I like a lot, once you guys get everything started, is that we like to include the non-endemic community. So what this means is people who don't know crap about video games. They don't know anything for the most part. They just think everything's a Nintendo. You know, my mom's called every system Nintendo for the past like 3 decades. Like that's just how it is. But she'll show up to an event, and so that's awesome. We love that. And so we try and get a bunch of people, whether it's businesses or community members, or Harrisburg's in the capital of Pennsylvania, so we actually get government people that show up, and they're like, okay, what's this? What's it about? And now over the last 3 years, because we've done this, we have a mix of students, we have a mix of non-endemic people that are kind of involved in esports now, and they want to be a part of it more now than they did previously. And I think that's a very unique aspect, but you have to have the groundwork started before you can do that part, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. I think, actually, I was raised in a family of gamers. My parents were more hardcore than me, so I can't relate to that, but it's so funny. I love it. Let's get to a question in chat. Just a thought: what would someone do if their school was really small, maybe a few hundred students, and they couldn't find enough people to start a club or a team? I mean, that's a very real question, right? Like, I think we may have already come close to answering it, but I like the directive of this. It's so direct. What do you do if you simply cannot? I mean, do you give up, or like, what are the alternatives?
I personally think that you bond over the passion of gaming first, and not necessarily worry about the title that you're playing. So not necessarily make it all about being a competitive team first, and just bond over the fact that like you guys really enjoy gaming, and maybe you like the competitive side and playing ranked. You can just talk about, hey, I don't know everything about your game, but like we both like the idea that we're trying to climb and trying to learn, and kind of bond over those types of things. Because obviously it's really hard to get 5, 6, 10, whatever it needs to be, amount of people. And you can do things like play fun games as well that are more meant to be social or party games and things like that. That would be where I would personally start.
Yeah, and Greg, please.
So I had actually a couple weeks ago, I'd actually hosted a panel that was the sole target was talking about smaller institutions that were 1,000 students or under generally, talking about what you do. You know, what do you do when you want to start a program? What do you do when you want to start a team and you just don't have the people? And kind of echoing off of what Chad said in 2 different aspects. Number one, it starts with just playing with another person. If you can find one person to just duo queue with, or even play normal games with, that's the first step. You know, you're creating the relationship through the game, you're creating that opportunity. But the second thing is to just look for these chances. You know, like obviously the main developer leagues like TESPA and CRL and Riot exist, but there's also other leagues that cater to these small schools. Like GG Leagues has leagues that are for bronze and silver players. CSL has leagues that are all the way down to that level, and some of them even have prizes. You know, another thing is local competition. You know, we talk a lot about national competition, but you know, especially in some of those smaller schools, like some of these smaller Division III schools, like there are rivalries within your athletic divisions that exist that you can look to enhance off of. You know, you can look to create those competitions off of, and all it takes is just finding any 5 people. So you start with creating that relationship between you and another person, and just build it off of there, and then you just find those leagues that match what you have currently, or even start those leagues, you know, what you have currently, and kind of just build off of that.
Yeah, I actually love this this data that we got in chat. Looks like about 1,000 schools have populations, you know, below 500, right? You know, 369 with a college below 100 students, 369 of those. For some reason, colleges with 100 to 500 students, 567. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of schools that would fall under that category and would need that question answered. One thing that I guess I can share from my own personal experience, back in high school, way back in high school, we used to have this thing called like the hobby fair. and like that was it. But it was like the biggest event. Like everyone knew like about the hobby fair, right? And one day, me and my friends just begged one of the teachers who was over, like, can we please just set up a CTR and play Smash Brothers? Like that's it. Can literally just the three of us just want to play Smash Brothers. And I found if you can somehow get video games in just the biggest thing your school has, it doesn't matter if it like just somehow try to find a way to get video games there. Simply the visibility of it. There are going to be people there who are much more interested in the video games they're playing than anything else in the room. So, trying to maybe piggyback off of the things your school is already doing, kind of what Greg was saying, take advantage of those existing rivalries or those existing events, and you can kind of weasel your way in. Oh, and actually, he excluded private schools. Those are just public institutions. Wow, so there's even more. Max, yeah, you have something to say.
That, yeah. Literally, like, I would say probably like 85, 90% of people have played either Smash or Mario Party at some point in time, or Mario Kart. Right? It doesn't matter. You go to a popular event and you just set up somewhere with like, 4 controllers and stuff. Like obviously the GameCube controllers, like hella, commodities at this point. Like, but you gotta just put yourself out there in a way that is engaging and very openly accessible. That like that people will have done. Like, yeah. I mean, I can't imagine any of you 4 have not done that by any means, right? Like played both of those games probably at some point or another. But
bro,
like,
I've been in a Mario Party tournaments. We put money on this, man. Me and my friends we took Mario Party seriously in Arizona. Guys,
more of that. Yeah. Like, sorry, I was going to say it's also a really good way to build up club numbers is to go to other clubs and try to organize like within that club. It's a really great way. We used to have back at my alma mater UCSB, we used to organize a lot of events with some of the international students unions, because that was a great way for them to sort of bridge the gap and sort of meet other people who are also in similar boat and stuff. It's just to like organize really, really simple games like that, like, hosting Smash tournaments and stuff. Yeah. Really popular. Yeah.
Well, guys, I can't believe it, but we are out of time. This was the last panel of IGEAS. Thank you guys so much for closing us out, for closing us home. I think in terms of stats, I think we had over 500 people show up to this event, which was really awesome. We had so much networking. There were so many meetings held. I'm actually kind of blown away at all of the networking that happened. So thank you guys so much for this collegiate community rewarding Invent Global for like putting this thing on. And by the way, our event doesn't end. Our event still goes on 19th through the 20th. This entire swap card networking environment is still online, and we are going full force on Hue. So by all means, turn into the Hue Invitational. You can find it all over our social medias. You can find it here. It's going to be a whole Hue takeover. So I guess, Chad, do you have anything else to say about the huge event that's coming up tomorrow?
Yeah, come watch. Come be a part of it. Yeah. If you have any questions, feel free to bother me. No, it should be a lot of fun. And I'm glad that we could set it up online this year because we weren't sure if we were going to be able to have it. So I'm very excited to be able to do it for the 3rd year in a row. So Thanks for being a part of the Invent Global Conference, and hopefully enjoy some games for you.
Yeah.
It's a huge event.
Huge.
Oh, he did it. He did it. Lock him up. He can't keep getting away with this.
And your team is disqualified.
Yeah, it's not okay. All right, guys. I'll talk to you later. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.